It's officially afternoon here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I am Ashley Calloway, the District 8 Coordinator for Wisconsin Farm Bureau. I work with the 7 county farm bureaus in north central Wisconsin, and I'm happy to serve as the moderator for today's topic, addressing the stigma around mental health. May is Mental Health Month, and we want to bring to light the topic of mental health through the Farm Neighbors Care campaign. The campaign asks rural residents to have face-to-face conversations with farmers and agribusiness owners. For some, this conversation and check-in may be the dose of positivity needed to make it through a tough day. Farm Neighbors Care is a collective effort between many agricultural organizations in the state. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items. Please keep yourself on mute throughout the webinar. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box or raise your hand to be called on. Lastly, this webinar will be recorded and posted later this afternoon. I'm happy to welcome our panelists for today's discussion. They are Brittany Olson, Randy Roker, and Clark Turner. I will start by having them each give a brief introduction of themselves.
I guess I'll start if we're going in alphabetical order. I'm Brittany Olson. I'm a 5th generation dairy farmer in Barron County. My husband Sam and I milk about 40 cows. We have registered Holsteins and Jerseys.
My name is Randy Roker. I'm from Loganville, Wisconsin. I farm along with my parents and my daughter and her husband. We milk about 300 cows and 750 acres. And I was the co-founder of the Farmer Angel Network here in the Loganville area.
Clark?
Yes.
Yes, you want to introduce yourself?
I do. I'm Clark Turner. I'm the Clark County Farm Bureau President. I have a dairy farm with my 2 sons. We milk about 120 cows, and I had an interest in this topic that we're talking about today because of just the tough situation in dairy farming and in farming in general. And I just know that oftentimes if you lend an ear, individuals will come to you and you realize that there's a lot of hurting out there in our industry, in our business. And oftentimes I've gleaned a lot of information and perhaps have been able to help some individuals. So that's why I'm here participating today.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we will go ahead and kind of hit the gate running and start it off with our first question here. And I don't know if we just want to kind of keep going and alphabetically, as Brittany said. What are some of the struggles you or those you know in rural communities facing?
I think the biggest struggle that we face, especially on farms and in rural communities, is isolation. We're disconnected from the resources that we need to access for basic health care, especially mental health care. And I think the pandemic has really exacerbated that isolation that we're all feeling and experiencing because we're not only disconnected from the resources and care that we need, but we're also disconnected from each other because we're not seeing each other as much anymore, if at all.
Randy, do you have anything you want to add?
The biggest thing for me is I think out here too is the financial pressure of, dairy farming, but all agriculture right now, dealing with the high prices that we're facing for everything and, the low returns that you get back on your product. And when I went through my struggle that started back in 2008, I built my operation in 2006. And then of course the recession hit in 2008. And you feel that, in my situation anyway, that I was losing this legacy that my grandfather had started. And I was always the last person that you would think that would have depression issues. And when I went through this, my family didn't know anything about it. And I went to my medical doctor, they really didn't know. And I was kind of just pushed through the system, with different people. And I think I was 8 psychiatrists and 7 therapists in my run with everything that I had because nobody knew how to deal with farmers especially. And it's kind of a niche market, I would say, that farmers are so unique in our struggles that that's what we need to find is people that can help us specifically deal with the problems that we're facing. And I guess in like isolation too, that's the big thing for farmers, that, you know, you're usually home a lot on the farm, and that's what happens. And you just your mind keeps going over these problems, and you're by yourself, and you just, you know, don't have anybody to talk them out with.
Thank you. Clark, do you have anything to add regarding the struggles that?
Well, I would have to agree. The financial aspect is always looming out in the forefront. You know, I've had some conversation with a few farmers in our county, and they don't know how they're going to move forward oftentimes. And so there is that sense of hopelessness. And beyond that, again, being alone, they're just not able to cope with that. And the isolation that was mentioned, they oftentimes feel like they're in it all alone, and they have no resources or no one to help. And they're concerned. They're concerned about losing everything they have. And I know in some of the conversations I had, you know, the individuals, they have so much stress that they actually have physical conditions that show up. I know a young farmer that if he's under immense stress, he actually, like, he'll break out with cold sores and stuff like that. And he can tell when it's coming on because he's under this intense stress. And so oftentimes I just like to sit down and lend them an ear and be able to talk with them and then work through some of their situations so that they point to some light at the end of the tunnel. And I find that's been helpful.
Great. The next question I have is, how can we stop the stigma around mental health conversations? Brittany?
You know, by just having the conversation is huge. For generations before us, mental illness was not something that was talked about, let alone discussed as openly as we're discussing it here right now. So just keep talking about it, and honestly pretending like there isn't a stigma around it will help to shatter the stigma that exists.
A horrible guard dog.
Randy, do you have anything you want to add?
That's the biggest thing for us too, is, you know, why we started that Farmer Angel Network here, is because it's basically, we can get together a group and we just go, and people talk and we listen to what their struggles are. And, you know, that's what we have to do, is just stop this stigma around it, because, you know, you can go to the doctor for any, other health issue, be it your heart or your whatever you have ailing you, but it's something about the mental illness that there's this stigma around it that people just, they don't open up. And that's what we're trying to do, is, make it okay for people to talk about it.
Clark, do you have anything to add on that, or we'll go on to the next question?
I see I keep getting booted off here. We have poor internet out here. I guess the stigma around it is, yes, we have not talked about it, and everybody can be ashamed of the situation. But I tell you what, we are all, made in His image, and so I tell you what, if we have some sort of a imbalance, or we're going through some stress, there is no reason for us to not seek help and to get help for that. Oftentimes we get so prideful that we would not seek help. We don't want to ask for help. We don't want to go out and say, hey, we're in a situation that we can't deal with. And so oftentimes I think that tends to be a hindrance for a lot of individuals who don't want to seek that help. And but I tell you what, it's you need to just humble yourself and seek that help, because the help is available. And if you don't, it just builds and it gets worse and worse and worse, and you get more hopeless and despair, and the outlook then is not good.
that kind of ties into our next question here of what advice would you give to a fellow farmer or neighbor who is struggling and afraid to reach out?
Jeff Ditzenberger made this quote kind of famous among the ag mental health community. It's okay to not be okay. We all have problems and we all have issues that we need to deal with. And I don't know that farmers are unique in that aspect, because we all have BS that we have to unpack and deal with. And the first step to solving the problem is admitting that there is a problem and admitting that you need help and admitting that you can't do it alone. And that's something that is unique to, this is unique to farmers. So we struggle with having to ask for help, but it's perfectly human to admit that we're just having a hard time. And I'm just babbling here. You can start talking, Randy.
I was just listening to you, Brittany, and it's the truth, you know, that we have to just get over this, that we bottle it up inside and we just hold it in. And that's the problem, that, you know, we have to start feeling comfortable. And farmers especially, you know, they just are very proud and, you know, hardy, and, you know, you just don't want to open up about things, especially like mental health. But that's the biggest thing that I have, is just, you know, to open up and talk to each other about this. And I know, Brittany, we went through that training class too, on that panel there. And we kind of moderate this. What do you want to say? We're kind of members of this panel. I haven't been too good in it yet, because I'm always in the field and in the barn and stuff like that. But, you know, that's what we have to do, is just feel comfortable listening to each other and, you know, be there for each other when we're having these problems.
Yep.
But there's such this stigma. And I know that was a couple years ago. I had a speak in front of the state of Wisconsin Speakers Task Force on Suicide Prevention and Mental Health. It was up at the Marshfield Clinics. And I know my mom went along with me, and, you know, she's 80 years old. And when I went into the auditorium, I don't know, there's probably 75, 100 people there or something. My mom wouldn't even come in. I mean, she sat in the hallway. She didn't even feel comfortable about me talking about my story and sharing what I went through. And see, that's the older generation. Now we just have to open up now for, you know, this generation that we have now, and, you know, accept that, you know, there are mental health issues out there, and we have to just open up more.
Art, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with especially what Brittany just said there previously. You know, regarding the stigma and everything, and obviously, you know, when individuals they do have a lot of pride in their operations, and they want to be self-sufficient. Obviously, that's why they're farmers. Farmers tend to be self-sufficient. But one of the things, sometimes they need to back away from their issues and be able to get the big picture. And oftentimes I tell, and I know I've said this more than once, talking and counseling with farmers that have come to me, and I ask them why they do the things that they do. And they're farmers, and so they farm, and that's their whole livelihood is wrapped up into that. That's who they are. And at some point, we try to get the conversation turned to make sure that they keep things in perspective. And one of the things that I tell them, you know, that I have to oftentimes remind myself is that you know, the difference between living to farm or farming to live is a big thing, because there truly is. Life is actually bigger than farming, but we need to be able to discern, you know, or delineate between where that line is, and our job cannot control our life. Our life needs to control our job, and so that's one of the things that I've often have turned to try to keep things in perspective and keep the big view, the worldwide view on it.
How can people continue to make a difference in their communities around the mental health conversation? Like, what is it that we can do to be able to improve that? Brittany?
Honestly, just keeping the conversation rolling, keep talking about it, keep encouraging your friends and neighbors to talk about it. And if someone comes to you needing to talk or needing help, you need to be able to lend an ear, because a lot of it's not a comfortable talk. It's not a comfortable topic to talk about, but we have to keep talking about it because it's going to help people, and it might even save lives by just letting people know that they're not alone and that they can get the help that they need. And honestly, just be a kind and empathetic person. It costs nothing to be kind, truly.
Mhm.
Randy?
I think Brittany and I were kind of the same too. You know, we both experienced, you know, our own issues or whatever you want to say with our struggles, I should say. So when you kind of experience that yourself, you know what people are going through firsthand. And it's hard if you go to a therapist and they've never struggled with anything like this personally, you know, how do you relate to somebody? And I guess that's the biggest thing that, you know, why we've kind of been speaking out on behalf of mental health like this, because, you know, we've struggled with this ourselves and we know this. And so that's why, you know, like in my area here, we get together as our group. And of course, now in the time of Zoom, we haven't been meeting in person. So that's unfortunate too, because I just feel some farmers out there, and there's a lot of other people that are struggling. You need that interaction, that human interaction, but we don't have it with Zoom right now. So we're looking forward to getting back, you know, to our in-person meetings again, that we can, you know, communicate more in person like that. But again, you know, I feel that since if a person experiences this firsthand, you know what a person is struggling with, and you can kind of guide other people through it.
Thank you. Clark, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think they pretty much covered everything there. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's
All right.
okay to not know what to say.
It's in this past year, I've been doing a lot of media work on behalf of our group, and I even received an email from a farmer in South Africa, and he was asking for help too. You know, he said, I don't know where to turn to. And so I've been emailing him back and forth, and, you know, farmers from other states have reached out to me too, that there is a lack of, you know, mental health care for rural America, to have a decent therapist to go to. So at least people with, you know, us speaking out on behalf of this, people can feel free to communicate with us and do it that way.
Mhm. I'm gonna chime in one thing. A year ago, maybe it's 2 now, in our district, we actually ended up hosting a QPR training, a question, persuade, respond. And so in District 8 here, we have over 30 individuals that are all QPR certified. So we're talking active directors, farmers, agribusiness leaders. And so I would want to say, like, that's a big thing that impacted in our district. And when we were doing goal setting this year, a lot of the county boards said, hey, we need to bring that back. We need to get more trained on that subject. So I think the community is definitely there and ready to do it. The last kind of question I had before we take them from the audience here is, what do you do personally for self-care?
I take my meds. If you have diabetes, you take insulin. If you have asthma, you use your inhaler. If you have a mental health condition, you need to take your medication. Because depression and anxiety, they're like a lot of other diseases, they can be fatal if left untreated.
Randy?
For me, I guess I don't know, like at night after chores, I like to go for rides around the countryside. Me and my significant other, she likes to go for rides, and we ride around the countryside and just look at nature and things like that. And, you know, we do like to go out to eat, you know, and have date nights and things like that. If I would stay home on the farm all the time, I think I couldn't handle it. I just have to get away, because, you know, when you live and work on the farm, it's like your stress is constantly there with you. And that's the problem that a lot of farmers face, is that they just, you know, don't get the time off that they need for, you know, some self-care. I was telling you, Ashley, before we started, I tried going to a gym, but there again, I mean, at 6 o'clock in the morning, 3 days a week, I just couldn't break away. And my 80-year-old mother would say, well, where are you going? And here it was 20 below zero and I'm going to a gym. I said, I can't do it anymore.
Clark?
Yes, I would agree with what Brittany and Randy both said, and for me, I know that one of the things for just to stay mentally healthy and to keep things in the right perspective is to communicate with family, and then to be able to have some accountability where you know, I know Randy said that oftentimes we get so caught up in our operation that we forget about other people. And I think it's important to be able to get with other people. I know during COVID and that we've not been able to do that. And that has had just a detrimental effect on a lot of people. And so being able to be a part, even Farm Bureau, I mean, to be able to go to meetings and be able to see people, we need that. We're social creatures, and we need to be able to talk with other people and to communicate with them. And so that's, I find, is important always. I find that, though, in even in my local church family as well, because that can be frequent. We can bear one another's burdens. We can talk. We can share. And so I find that just very valuable. And then also, not only are you getting help from that, but you don't even know how you're helping other individuals by that communication, by that dialogue back and forth. And I find that has just been very, very beneficial.
Great. All right, we will start with questions from the attendees here. Ryan, do you have a question? I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, but just a comment and reiterating some of the things Brittany and Randy and Clark have talked about. Going through an experience last spring, a barn fire, extremely stressful, high anxiety, probably depression as well, but never, I guess, seek medical attention for it. But and going through QPR training and understanding those aspects and things to watch out for, I find it really easy to go down the road and depend on alcohol or maybe even other drugs. And it's better to reach out and get that medical attention and use the proper medicines to help with anxiety and that. And I did take medicine for anxiety to cope through the day and function. And it's something you don't have to rely on forever, but you need to be able to reach out and get the help to do it so you don't go down that path and depend on something you shouldn't have to depend on. So I guess, and even just talking and attending seminars like this makes you understand those signs and know when to get help and ask for help.
Great.
That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. One of the first questions we had received was, any experience working with farmers in denial? How do you get them to first accept their situation?
Oh, that's a good one. Honestly, just be there for them.
I think
Exactly.
if you just keep communicating with them, you know, just talking with them, and I think sooner or later they'll open up, is what happens when they feel more comfortable around a person. Then they'll start sharing their story.
Yeah, I agree with that, Randy. To be a friend to them a friend is just invaluable in times of need. And so to be friendly to them and be kind and to know that you really let them know that you really do care. That is very important. And once you have that level of trust, they will confide in you. They will talk to you, and they'll listen to what you have to say. And you can usually guide and direct them to some additional help.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. I think like most therapists that I had gone to, it just seems so medical like, you know, it just, I don't know, just such a cookie cutter approach. And it was just so medical or sterile or whatever you want to call it, you know, that I didn't feel comfortable even opening up to anybody. And I think, you know, being a farmer advocate for mental health, and Brittany understands too that, you know, I don't know, it's just something about talking to another farmer that is comforting in itself, that they understand.
I had a farmer from the southern part of the state, then again, everything is south of me where I'm at, a couple of years ago that reached out to me after she had walked in on her husband with a gun in his mouth, not just once, but twice. And that worries me. He's still here with us today, but usually there are warning signs leading up to a suicide attempt that if we're paying really, really, really close attention, we can realize that, hey, this individual needs some help. We need to talk to them.
A lot of times too, when I went through my own struggles, you know, my therapist and my psychiatrist, they gave me the 1-800 number all the time, you know, and we had it posted in the house. But honestly, I would never call the 1-800 number. I don't know. I just felt so embarrassed that I felt that they were going to lock me up if I would call that number. And you get so used to hiding it that I go to my therapist and, you know, she'd say, any thoughts of suicide or harming yourself? Oh, no, I'm fine. You know, I hid it all the time. And then the medical conditions started, you know, then I started to lose so much weight. You know, I wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. And I had a lot of medical issues on top of it all. So that's what happened in my situation. But, you know, it's hard otherwise.
A really good friend of mine and my husband's died by suicide last fall, and it completely blindsided everybody that knew him. But if you looked back, the signs were there. So if there's anyone that you're close to in your life and something just seems different or off about them, and you have a hunch that things might not be hunky-dory, act on it. Because you'll feel better about having listened to them for, you know, 2 hours than having to listen to their listening to their eulogy at their funeral.
In my situation too, I was on so many different kinds of medication that I don't know, it was like I would go to a psychiatrist and they wouldn't know what to do with me. So then I'd go to another one and another one. And it seems like every other month I was on 3 more different medications, and I was just so drugged all the time. And honestly, it's a wonder that I didn't do something to myself, because I wasn't even thinking clearly, because I was on so many different kinds of medications that were overlapping each other. And that's what happened in my situation there, that I was just so drugged out all the time that, you know, I'd get in the truck and I'd drive off to the back field someplace and just sit there and cry because I didn't know what else to do. You know, you have this feeling of hopelessness all the time.
That kind of ties into the next question that was asked of, how do you start those conversations with individuals that you think might be struggling? You kind of started down that path, Brittany, if you want to, or if anyone else has to add what Brittany had already talked about.
Well, like, you know, my situation too, that I went through all these, you know, I didn't take care of myself at all. I lost so much weight, and, you know, I didn't shave or, you know, clean up or anything like that. I was just a shell of a person. And now anybody that would have seen me like that would have known. But back in 2008 and 9 area, we didn't talk about it much, and nobody recognized the signs, and it was bad. And, you know, my family didn't know where to turn to. So that's the biggest thing. Like, if I recognize, you know, somebody that I'm talking with, and I've been at different meetings already where people have pulled me aside and we went in the hallway and just talked. And, you know, I think now that I've been there, I kind of recognize the signs.
All right.
Yes,
Right.
you know, the first part of QPR is question, and obviously, if you're in a conversation with somebody, oftentimes you can kind of get a read on that person to whether they're struggling with something. And we were told in our QPR training to be bold and come right out and ask. And we shouldn't feel ashamed to do that. And in response, they should not feel ashamed to respond or answer your question, and truthfully. And there again, it goes back to building a relationship and having that communication avenue, if you will, to be able to have that trust to where you can actually ask somebody a question. You're not looking at hurting yourself in any way, and to be able to get a good response back from that, and let them know that you do care.
That's the biggest thing, you know, to befriend somebody and be able to ask them comfortably. Because if you just, you know, randomly ask somebody if they have thoughts of hurting themselves, I mean, a lot of people would just blow up and be mad, I think, you know, and you just have to, first of all, you know, earn that friend status or whatever, that you would feel comfortable, you know, talking to each other.
The next question is, any ideas on how to support the youth on the farm as their parents struggle with mental health and suicide? I feel they are often the unforgotten piece of this conversation. And they go on, I'm an example of that, and 30 years later, I'm still kind of dealing with that. So any advice on how to support the youth on the farm?
That's a really good question, and that's honestly been a pet topic of my advocacy. So when I was in 3rd and 4th grade, my parents had a horrific divorce, and my mother was not only emotionally abusive, but physically abusive toward me, especially because I look like my dad. And even, you know, 20 some years later, I'm still unpacking all the horrible things that she did to me. And as I have endured a number of adverse childhood events that are clinically proven to have detrimental effects on children all the way through adulthood. And when you look at adverse effects like that, you know, divorce, disability, death of a family member or a pet, just anything that could really traumatize a child, you start to realize, wow, a lot of farm kids have been through almost all of these. And the thing there is helping children process their emotions and their feelings in a healthy way so that it doesn't cause lasting trauma for them, and making it a priority to get them the care that they need, whether it's going to a therapist or a doctor. Just get them the help that they need so they can get back to being kids again.
That's the biggest thing that I struggle with too, is what I put my kids through. I mean, when this started, I think my son was probably in 7th grade or so, and my daughter was probably like a sophomore or so in high school or a junior. And I was just, I'm going to struggle with this for a long time, because what I really put them through. And I know one time they couldn't find me, and my daughter found me. I had taken too many pills and I was laying in the bathtub. I had my clothes on and there was no water in it, but I had passed out in the bathtub. And they knew that I was really bad and struggling. And she told me one time, she said, "Oh, Dad, it's okay. We understand," she says. And, you know, I was really checked out for most of their high school and my daughter's college years and everything. And so, you know, I'll have guilt with that for a long time that I'm going to struggle with. But, you know, they seem to understand, I guess.
Mark, do you have anything to add?
Well, just, you know, not having to actually go through that myself. I know that it would be important if you are a friend to the individual, oftentimes, and you're able to, they can confide in you, and the younger generation sees that, they get a view of that, and you can be an outsider who they know that they can trust. And so you, again, can have dialogue with them. You can just be somebody who brings wise counsel along when they need it. And if you don't mislead the young generation, if you actually speak to them and you tell them the truth and they see that you're authentic, I think you can offer a lot of help and assistance to them, to where they come back and they realize that you're somebody that they can count on when they have an issue. And I found that has been the case for me when I do talk to individuals. I get a dialogue. Their kids will actually perhaps want to draw near, or their face will actually brighten up when they see you, and it's like, oh, he's here, great, wonderful, and it goes a long way, I believe.
Hi, Sherry, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have anything that you want to add or question? You're muted.
I'm sorry about that. I can just speak to experience on what happens. Like Ryan had talked earlier about our barn fire last spring. We were both not in a good mental state and both had to be medicated and struggled with everything on a daily basis. And our kids seen it and they were going through the same crisis. And as a parent, I wanted to help them so much, but I couldn't because I was so lost in my own grief. And luckily, like, the school knew we were going through this. And so they reached out and offered counseling. And of course, none of our teenage boys would have anything to do with that. So I set up an appointment with the assistant principal, and he would Zoom call them every week. And I would email him and tell him what I was noticing that they were having issues with, and he counseled them. And then we had a really great friend who was here almost every day to help us out on the farm. And him and his wife took our kids and they took them on little mini vacations over the weekend to get them away from it, to be able to reset and be able to handle the issues that were going to come the following week. So I agree 100% with Clark. If you have that person that the adults trust, those kids are going to trust that person just as much, and know that they're there to make sure that their mental health is good too.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next question that we have here is, what would be a general timeline guide of support so that we're not dismissive or too tender to others?
I don't know that you could be too tender to somebody in a situation like this. I think all the tenderness you could muster is paramount, because it is such a touchy topic. But I'd say follow up with the person between 1 to 2 weeks after that initial first contact, because we're farmers, life is busy. But if you notice something goes downhill with that person, even between that 1 to 2 week mark, I'd follow up with them again.
I would. This is Clark here. I would have to agree with that. And even this day and age, I know that even a simple text, looking for a text in return, and just keeping a simple little dialogue going, even inside of the week to 2 weeks, is a great thing to keep people communicating, and it just lets them know again that you really do care, that you've taken the time to just send them something and asking them a simple question. It really it fills in that blank a little bit in that time period, but definitely the follow-up is very important.
Yes, that's exactly right. A lot of times too, I just follow up, with text messages all the time. How are you doing today? How are you feeling? And that, I don't know, that's just enough to show somebody that you care, that, you're interested in them and trying to help them out.
And we're all busy. But it takes 5 seconds to send a text saying, "Hi, how are you doing?"
You just don't know what that means. I know when people would check in on me too, that, I was in such a bad place that when somebody would, call and say, "How are you doing?" You just don't know how that means, what that means to a person, that somebody's caring about you like that.
This is Clark again. Just thinking about this same line, and we just recently handed out some packages, Farm Neighbors Care. And I tell you, what a great opportunity to just go and hand a simple little bag to somebody and tell them that you do care, that you're thinking about them, and that it's from Farm Bureau, and that we're aware of the hard work and the struggles that you're going through. I tell you, it was very well received. And the people that we went to, we wanted to go to them because we knew there was maybe some struggles there. And that just turned out to be a great thing.
I don't see that there's any other questions. So I am going to ask Brittany, Randy, and Clark, is there anything else that you want to add in here before we kind of head into wrap up?
I think we had a great conversation today, and I hope this helps people that are listening in today. And I also hope it inspires us, all of us that are here, to keep helping others and to keep talking about it.
My mother always told me, she said, you need to be a good listener. She told me that all while I was growing up, and it holds true so much more now in these times that we're going through. You know, just be there for each other and be a good listener. That's what we need.
Yes, absolutely. We need to be effective listeners, good listeners. We need to be friendly and find ourselves in a manner that is appealing to other people. The other thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And just like a unique piece of equipment, whether it be a lab testing equipment, every so often you need to recalibrate the machine. And I think oftentimes farmers also need to take some time out and to recalibrate and get back on focus and understand what your priorities are and what is indeed the main thing.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to thank Brittany, Clark, and Randy for joining us today and being part of the conversation. I hope you were all able to gain valuable insight and information from your participation. We will be hosting another webinar next week, Wednesday, May 19th from noon to 1. The topic will be on farmer mental health research and results, and we will welcome scientists from Central Wisconsin and beyond. We will share recent research and results surrounding agriculture and rural mental health. I also want to remind everyone to nominate someone for our Heroes of Hope campaign. This effort is focused on shedding light on rural heroes who have helped others through a tough time, whether it be helping harvesting crops while going through a tough time, providing positivity in their day-to-day careers, or just uplifting other farmers to help get them through a tough season. Heroes of Hope aims to identify people who have helped bring hope to farmers or businesses, either in large or small ways. Members of the agricultural community are encouraged to nominate individuals who have made an impact on the way they conduct business, both ordinarily and extraordinarily. To nominate someone you know, visit the Wisconsin Farm Bureau website at wfbf.com. Thank you again for your participation today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Ashley. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for all your efforts and a very worthwhile topic.